Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Snowflake's series of webinars. Tonight, we're going to talk about thinking outside the box, creating graphics. Danielle Macklin will be online talking to us about how she creates graphics. At this point, I'll turn it over to Danielle. Thank you, Danielle, and hope everyone has a great webinar.
Thank you, Jack. So as Jack was saying, I'm going to be sharing information on how to create your own custom graphics. The program I'm going to be using to share how I do that is just Google Drawings. I figured since Google's so ubiquitous, it made sense to use that just to demo. And then I'll give you some tips too on other resources that you can use in creating your own graphics. So I'm going to start with sharing my screen. So I'm going to, in addition to showing you how to create your graphics, I'm going to do that with creating 3 different lessons, if we have time for 3. I think maybe only 2. I'm going to share with you the assessment lesson types. So I'm going to create my example lessons using one of our 8 assessment types. So when I say assessment type, that means when you send these activities to students to complete from the Snowflake dashboard of managed classes, then you can set it as a gradable assignment, and that information can be sent back to you. So you would get a score on how students performed on these activities. So I'm going to use the tags one. Tags is one of my favorites for creating graphics because you have the ability to change this standard picture. So when we create our customized graphic, this image will be replaced by whatever you decide to design. I'm going to show you a graphic that I made just using Google Drawings, and then I will go through how I created that. So this particular graphic is just a simple Google Draw example, and putting it together really didn't take too long. It took me more time actually gathering the facts because I don't know that much about science and definitely not a lot about planets. So just curating the information first, and then building it, making it so it was unique to my students was actually a really easy process. So I'm going to start with a blank Google Drawing. Now, typically when you open up your Google Drawing platform, and I know most of us do have Google, if you're using a different program, if you're doing a Microsoft program, or really anything that you would create pictures with, even things like Word documents or slideshows, if it's a PowerPoint or a Google slide, most of those can also be downloaded as JPEGs, which is what we want to create as our final product. Now with Google Drawing, my page, I have it customized, but the typical size, if I were to open this up fresh, would be set there. So I'm going to first make sure that my page is the correct size. So when I go to page setup, whenever we're creating a tag or a general background, we usually create ours using pixel sizes, and the dimensions are 1920 by 1080. And you'll see that that stretched out my size. So I know what I want to include. I know I'm going to make the boxes of information about my my planets. So I'm going to first create, oops, here you go, insert my directions. So I'm going to use word art. You can do this as a text box, the task that my students will need to complete. Now, when you create your own custom graphics, one of the reasons I really enjoy doing this is knowing what the needs of my students. So you know the needs of your kids better than anybody, and you're going to know what visuals would appeal most to those kids. Maybe they have certain unique interests and you want to kind of customize your pictures to represent that, or you want to make it a theme for whatever it is you're studying. Creating your graphics gives you that opportunity. You'll also know too if they have any visual needs. So if it's making sure it's not too busy, if you have students who might have challenges with attention or are distracted by other things on the page, this would make it a little easier. So I'm going to then put in a box. So I'm doing this just kind of like a chart of information. I've created math activities in the same flow, where I've had like little boxes of problems they had to solve, and then the pins would be the answers that they will pull in. Do that, and I'm going to fill it in white. So, and then what you see with Google Drawings and a lot of programs is you're going to have this kind of blank background, and I want to change that. I want that to be a little prettier. So since I'm talking space, I'm going to pull in a picture that I found that was a really pretty kind of outer space scene. So this will be just my background, and I'm going to send that to the back. Just order it, put it to the back, and have that cover my entire tag box. I'm only going to do one of the boxes. I don't want to go through and spend all of the time putting in the information, but just to give you an idea of kind of my workflow as I'm creating. So in this box, I'm now going to add my text box and my information. So I'm going to have information about the planets. So my first fact will be this planet is furthest from the sun, and the moon, Triton, orbits in the opposite direction. So there we go. I'll make this a little bit bigger. I can change my font. I can do all that fun stuff. Size 30. Oh, that's a little too big. I'm just doing that as a blank. A lot of times I like to actually create a little box in tags of where exactly I want my students to drop the pin. So for now, I'll just do it like this. So then I would include information in each of these boxes. And when I was happy with what I have created, I would then download as a JPEG. And then going back to my Snowflake activity, share that again. I'm now going to change this background image to the one that I just created. So I'm going to select Browse New Image. And when I download it as a JPEG, I'm working on a Mac computer, so anytime I download, it just saves onto my computer's hard drive. I'm not sure if you can see that on the bottom of the screen here. But I could also take that same image and I could save it into my Google Drive, which is what I usually do every couple weeks when I clean out my hard drive. I save it to my online storage. But in this case, I'm just going to pull it up from my computer. So I have my planets, and I'm going to pull in the completed one. So there we can see I now have my custom graphic included in here. Now this size that I use, this 1920 by 1080, this would cover the entire position, but I could make this smaller. If I wanted half as big, I could make a smaller graphic and I could change kind of that dimension. This is just the biggest it could possibly be. And for visual perspective, I just thought it would be easier to show you kind of the largest size. And then with the tags, I then need to add in the information that the students have to locate. So in this case, it would be for identify planets. I would need to have those planets. Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars, etc., etc., etc. And then now I can place those tags. Trying to remember where I moved everything earlier. All right, and Mars, which one was Mars? There we go. Okay, so you get the idea. So then my students, when they would complete this task, they would then need to move those pins to the correct location. So there's just a very simple graphic I made. The time it actually took me to make this entire one was about 15 minutes. And then maybe an additional like 10 minutes tops trying to find all of the information. And then I do get a little extra, like right now I see this one's not lined up perfectly, so I probably would have like altered that for my particular class. But time-wise, it's really easy to do, being able to have that custom information for my students. Another way to make your graphics, again, I'm going to use Google Docs, and I'm going to do a different lesson activity. I think Google Docs is really easy to operate too, because it does have so many just easy built-in tools. As far as if I wanted to have a text box, I could have a text box and include math symbols, or kind of like a mini equation editor. So I'm going to do, I think, a match one next. So match is matching one tile to a word. So I'm going to do this one on polygons. And for now, just to show you what a match would look like, it would be those tile boxes matching to a word. So I'm going to change the background for those boxes. And I'm going to do it again with a Google drawing. I'll open up a new one and I'll share that screen with you. So if I go to my brand new Google drawing, so with all of our tiles, so anything that has the square, whether it be cards or if it's the boxes for a drop activity or the boxes for a match activity or the boxes for a group activity, whatever, any of the activities that have just the square boxes, you need to just make sure that your page setup is a perfect square. So I usually don't pay a lot of attention to pixels in this case. I usually just make sure it's square. So 10 by 10 inches or 200 pixels by 200 pixels. It does. As long as it's square, it's going to be good. It'll render the same. So I have my box and I'm going to do a math one. And I'm actually going to take information that I found from an online math textbook, and I'm going to take those images and use that to make my custom graphic. So I'll show you the math book that I found. I found this resource through OER Commons. So there's a lot of really great education resources, and a lot of them are classified as what's called no strings attached. So they're available for Creative Commons use and licensing. So that's where I went to find this. So these images, if I were to make this on my own, it would probably take me a long time, but I'm going to just borrow these particular pictures. And I'm going to simply take a screenshot. You could also just copy and paste these images. So if this is from, maybe you have like an online version of your textbook, you can pull in that image. And now if I go back to my drawing, so I have my square box, I'm going to pull in that image that I just took a quick screenshot of. And now I can stretch it and scale it just a little bit more. So the task is obviously students will find the area, so it's pretty early level, so they just count how many tiles are in that particular shape. And then I'm going to actually change the background again. So right now when you see these kind of dotted gray backgrounds, that's going to kind of be erased when you set it up in your, or when you download it as your JPEG. So I'm just going to add a little color so that I have a border around it. And again, I'm simply going to download that image as a JPEG. Just download it onto my hard drive. And going back to sharing, to go back and forth, sharing my Snowflake lesson, I can then pull in that image. So it really didn't take a lot of extra time for me to find the image that I want. There we go, poly 1. And we can see I have my image there. Right now I have the image set for fit. So that way I know it's going to fit perfectly in that box. It's not going to be stretched out too far, or it's not going to disappear. I can delete my text. I'm trying to remember what the answer for that one was. I think that one was 5. And I'm going to pull in just other examples. Same place that I grabbed the previous pictures from. I'm just going to grab a couple more. And this is if I'm pulling in just a straight screenshot. You can see with the screenshot, because it's not a perfect square, it's going to have its own little border at the top and at the bottom. If I change the fit of it, it does scale it so that it fits a little bit better within that box. I'll do one more. So these are just images that I took a screenshot of from that OER Commons. And I'm now just pulling into my lesson activity. I think the answer for this one was 6, and I think this one was 12. I'm guessing. So now I have these images, and then my students would, when they played this lesson activity, their task would be to count how many boxes make up that particular shape and then match it to the correct number. So no, I would get rid of that text. So then they would just drag and drop. If it's correct, look at the little check. Incorrect, as you saw, they'll have the X with it. And right now I have it just the one round, but you can have multiple rounds so that you can do activities like this with your students for as long as you felt that they needed to answer the questions or do the activity. So we go now back to edit. Now, if at any point you do have questions, please feel free to send them into the chat box, and Jack can relay them my way. Otherwise, I'll just keep showing you lesson activities. Another example, I'm going to do a new activity. One of my favorites is the Einstein activity, where I have, what I look at it as, it's like having a big canvas where I can put information. So with Einstein, I'm going to do this on World War II. Oops, there we go. With Einstein, as I'm creating my questions, it's multiple choice questions, but there can be more than one correct answer. So we have my question, and then we'll just have, pretend answer 1, pretend answer 2, et cetera, et cetera. And you can see as I'm putting in those answers, I have those tiles. I can create a background graphic so that this entire background then of my lesson activity becomes the task that I want my students to do. So I taught social studies, so we did a lot with primary sources. We did a lot with maps. We did a lot with maps, trying to analyze maps. So I could theoretically create a graphic that would be the resource my students would use as they created or as they answered questions about that particular graphic. So I can show you how to do that next. So I'm going to go back. Yes.
A question came in saying, what was the website again for the math images you used? Was it oercommons.org?
I think it's .org. Let me just open up.
If it's OER Commons, it is .org.
Okay, it is .org. Yeah.
Okay. For us, we have to be very careful that we don't use anything that is not commercially okay for us to use. So we're very careful with copyright. For teachers, you have a little bit more leeway with the fair use policy. But I would recommend that all of you, that you become familiar with some of these websites. OER Commons, you can search by standards, you can search by subject area, by age, and they have an unbelievable amount of information for every subject area. So they're a great place to go. Somebody else just wrote in, Pixabay is a place I use as well. You can go to creativecommons.org as well.
Yes.
So Pixabay is where we take most of our graphics, and creativecommons.org is another great one. So thank you, Sarah. That was from someone that works for our partner here in the US. So there are so many places where you can get some great information and content that you can use in your classroom. So I encourage you to check them out. With the websites, I think maybe what we can do is try to put together a collection of stuff and mail it out to people. That would be helpful.
Yes, absolutely. So I was sharing my screen earlier for OER Commons. This is Pixabay. So this is actually the particular image I had searched for, that space image. But if I go back to their home site, it's very simple. Type in the keywords, and then you can filter out the type of image you want. So if I want, I don't know, tats, I can search it by photos, vector graphics, illustrations, etc. Change the category. I use a lot of the backgrounds and textures. So this is where I do pull a lot of my resources from. So a lot of pictures, easy stuff to find. I mean, we're like thousands and thousands and thousands of graphics that you can use, and you can manipulate and kind of do whatever you need to do with your creative process. So if I go back, I heard a ding come in. So if there's a question, I'll wait a moment before I proceed.
It was saying that they would love a Google Doc of the resources they can share. So I think for both people that we're looking at, we can get that out. And my email is jr@nuitec.com. So if you would like a copy of the stuff that we put together, email me and I'll get it to you. I don't want to spam everybody, so email me if you would like that.
About creating for Einstein. And I mentioned that for the Einstein activity, you can have the entire background be a customized graphic. So you could have multiple problems that maybe for math that you wanted your students to do, or word identification activities. So like your sight words and pictures that correspond with them. And again, it would be a very simple, just customizing the size. So any platform you're on, you're going to want to have the same dimensions, 1920, 1080. And then in this case, if I were I'm thinking of my social studies students, I would bring in a picture of, I think I found, there we go, World War II, something I taught with my 8th grade students. And practicing map skills is pretty important. So I would have this picture, make it a little bigger. I think I actually did use this picture too. It looks really familiar. And then I'll change my background. Let's do that one. So I can then take this particular image. You can see I'm doing a lot of little extra things to it. Like I'm adding a border. I wanted to change the background. I could have even directions alongside that for what I wanted my students to do. So maybe they might get confused of like, why is this picture here? What am I supposed to do with it? I could include a text box that would tell my students use the map to answer the questions. But sometimes our kiddos are not always intuitive of what they need to be doing. If I were doing this in my classroom, I would probably make this really big and put it on both sides, just to make sure there was no confusion of what my kids needed to be working on. And then again, just download it as a JPEG. And then if I go back to my snow.live activity, instead of changing just the background for my little tiles, I can change this entire background into the map that I just put together, which I think was that one. And now my students would have this resource as they were answering their questions in this part of the Einstein activity. So I would use this map. I would have a question that would say, which countries were part of the Axis powers in 1939. So my students have to use the map legend to answer the questions. I'm going to add some right ones and some wrong ones. And with Einstein, you can select multiple correct answers. And I could also extend the time all the way up to 60 seconds so that my students would have an opportunity to really dive in and analyze that information. So we'll just do this one as 19 seconds for now. And then as my students play the lesson activity, this map would be there for them to analyze. And the question would appear in this bottom box. And again, I would probably change this into larger fonts. I could even customize these particular pictures. Maybe I wanted to do flags of the country, and they would simply drag and drop. If it's correct, you get the ding and the little point. If it's incorrect, you lose a point. So and the timer will be ticking down as they go. So that's taking a custom graphic that I built for my activity for whatever it was I was teaching, and used the whole thing as a background to drive my instruction, to drive my questions.
Danielle?
Okay. Yes.
Are there places I can search for graphics other than Pixabay or photos to use in my lessons?
Yes, absolutely. So if you're searching or if you're creating your lesson, we actually have curated a bunch of graphics. So I just opened a card lesson activity because I wanted to make it big enough to show everyone. When you're searching background, you can pull in backgrounds from your computer. You can also do an image search. So this would just pull in from anything that's tagged. Right now it has the number 1, but maybe I wanted this to also be an animal. Let's do dogs now. And this would pull in kind of a multitude of things from the internet. So I could go through and select from that. The other option, I could pull in anything from my Google Drive or OneDrive if I have pictures saved there, or we could go through our content gallery. And this is where we have a lot of images stored. So for all of the tiles, I would look in the drawings folder. And we have all of our different categories within that folder itself. So if I were doing a lesson activity on weather, open the weather folder. And now I have pictures related to weather. Or if I were doing math, we have subcategories. These are all numbers, and they're all kind of cutesy little, you have cookies, and you can see like the cookies have numbers on them, a little cookie jar. I love the cupcake ones are really cute. So you can find all of those. Let's just take one for an example. So we can see as I pull it in, that graphic is now on my card. And then I'll go back to my content gallery. Other examples, I mean, we have lots of categories. You can do just your basic standard tile square. We have our animals. We have lots of subcategories for animals. Let's look at caterpillars. Not that I would want a caterpillar anywhere near my cupcakes. But these are just fun little drawings that we already have created for you and put into our folders. Math has a bunch of numbers. Oh, I already showed you math. Math has numbers. Letters, we have the capital letters, lowercase letters. So if I did rainbow letter, you can see we have all of that. And you could also use that same folder for the background here. So if I go to my content gallery, I could pull in just a drawing, or I could even pull in backgrounds. So we have our kind of really pretty designed backgrounds, glittery ones, and that would just change the background of the entire lesson activity. We do have a subfolder in that for if I were doing like a tags lesson. Go back to my content gallery, backgrounds, tags. We have different examples of things you would maybe want students to identify. So in this case, like you can see, we have a lot of little animals. I think we have like human anatomy, we have the water cycle, geography, those kind of things. So then your students would be able to identify that. So that's one example. So that's just stuff we have already built into the software. You don't need to download any of those images. Once you select it, they do become part of that lesson activity.
So I had a question that said, when you see the content gallery, you have to have the Snowflake software installed on your computer, correct?
Nope, this is all on snow.live.
Yes, that's what so I went on my phone to make sure that I wasn't lying, because I do have this stuff installed on my computer and it's working from my phone as well. So I just want to say, yes, it does work. I have another question that I'm not sure I understand. So when I'm asking it, if you want to clarify it for me, maybe Danielle, you do understand? It says, is there a way that instead of a square, you can have another tool?
Okay, so the tiles themselves. So for most of the activities, the tiles will be just the square shape. You do have the ability in 2 of the lesson templates to change the shape. So I'm going to change this lesson activity. I'll keep my little cupcake image there to show you. If I can change that shape from a square to under the drop activity, I can do the tile shape as a hexagon, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, yep, hexagon, or a circle. So that's one activity where you can change the shape, but that is, unique to this particular activity. The other activity, to change this activity type, where I can change the shape, is in the seats activity. And I know when we think seats, we often think like seating chart, which yes, that is what you could do. But you also have the ability to do a lot more with this particular template. So again, I could change the shape. So I have one of those 3 options. And with seats, so right now it's set to a grid. You can customize the size of your grid up to 10 by 10. The squares obviously will get smaller as you change the size of it. So go back to maybe 3 by 3. But you also can take it so it does not, when we say snap to grid, that means it's going to lock in place. So right now when I move it, it locks. Can't move it anywhere else. If I deselect that, that disappears. Now I have this. So I could theoretically, and I've done this with some of my activities, I could create my background as a customized graphic, and then all of my tiles I could have as individual things that maybe I want my students to move into a particular location. So if I were teaching preschool and we were doing, our morning meetings, I might have all of my tiles for the days of the week or the date, and my students can move, today is Monday, April 2nd, and move it to the different spaces on the background that I created. So there's a lot of flexibility in this particular lesson design.
Danielle,
Yes.
are the snow foxes in the content gallery?
I don't believe they are yet. I know that we were asked that before because they are adorable. And I did put that in my notes from one of our last webinars. So I'm not sure if they're going to be put in. I know I did mention that it had been requested because they are really cute. I don't know the status of that yet, but I will make note that it was asked again.
Okay. And I can tell those are elementary people asking those questions. So as a secondary person, I would never think of it.
I love the little fox. They're adorable. So I know I went through a lot of how to create different graphics, but I'd love to be able to open up to any questions that you might have regarding anything related to Snow.live or any challenges maybe you're experiencing as you're moving to remote learning that we could help alleviate for you. So I'll let that marinate for a second while you think about it and anything I can do to assist.
So as we're looking at remote learning and you were showing about how to create the graphics and things, I did want to kind of make a point of, you said it took you 15 to 25 minutes to do the entire gathering of the information. So the fact that she is able to go out and gather the information, and in addition, she is able to build the graphics and build an entire lesson activity in about 15 to 25 minutes is pretty good. So as you're looking at remote learning and you're looking at building stuff for your students that can engage them and you get information out to them, this is really kind of cool because it's like playing games with them. So they're going to be a lot more apt to go in and do these things than some just typical a document or a slideshow or something that they may get a little bit tired of at times. So I think it's really great to do that. If quickly, because there are some new people on this evening, if you're able to show in just a couple of minutes of how to send an activity to a student, and then also quickly just a brief overview of LIST. I know I don't want you to go deep into LIST because I know we could do an entire program on that, but just so that people that are new, because I would say about 3/4 of the people on this evening are first-time guests. So if you could just tell a couple of things about this.
Sure, absolutely. And I'm glad you brought up the list thing because I prepared for that too, using my planets information. So Jack mentioned the ability to send lesson activities to students. So you can create within your teacher dashboard, you can create your own classes under the Manage Student feature. You have the ability to do it through manual entry. So that would be adding in students individually, their names. Even if students do not have email, you can select that as an option and add them in by names, and then it would generate a password for the kiddos. Or you can import from Google Classroom or through a CSV file of your student emails. So those are ways to do it. And if at any time you want me to go through and explain that more, I'll happily do that as well. So right now I have my slew of lots of little test classes that I've created. I'm going to send my student a lesson activity from my lesson activities. So let's say I want my students to complete this World War I activity. Using my 3-dot option, the more options, I can send that activity to the students. I could also send anything from the Snowflake community. So I don't necessarily need to have it in my lessons. I could get anything from the Explore page and have that same function to send to my students. I had mentioned at the beginning when I was creating that we have 8 of those gradable templates, those assessment templates. When we have that option, you'll see this little gradable assessment, and you just simply click that so that you can then get a score once your student has completed the assignment. Within my classes, I can select which students I want to send the activity to. So this is great if I'm providing differentiation. I can select a due date and then send that activity to my students. And then my students would open Snowflake from their dashboard and play that activity, and it would return to me the data. So if I go to review progress, I then have the ability to see, there's the lesson I just sent. I have the ability to see the lesson activities my students have completed. In my different classes, you can see all my list of classes. And I'll go to one that I've actually completed. The only students I currently have in my class are myself. So it's any assignments and stuff I'm doing. So we can see there's an assignment I sent. It was gradable. I have the information of the average class score at the time. I can export the results. So when I select that option, it downloads as a CSV file. So it'll show me each of the questions and answers for each student. I also can select individual students and see the breakdown of questions and answers that they received, their overall score, how long they spent completing an activity, and then I can provide them with feedback. So if I edit this feedback, say anything that I want to my student. And then that my student would then, when they saw the returned assignment, they would be able to see my feedback and their results as well. They'll get their results as far as their score as soon as they finish the gradable assessment. They'll see how they performed. And then they'll get a notification. You can see that little icon there. They'll get the notification that they had feedback from their teacher. The other option I can do is I can send lists to my students. So I'm going to, you see under my lesson activities, a list is like a playlist. So I can have multiple activities that I want to send to my students. So this be our solar system list. I'm going to name my list. Your list will always default to whichever one you made most recently, being at the top. And I'm going to, before I add any activities to this list, I'm going to attach a PDF. So this is a new feature that we've just included. Your PDF, as you're building your list, your items are going to appear in the order that you put them in the list. So if I want a PDF at the beginning, I would have to add it first. If I want my PDF at the end, obviously I would add it last. So I'm going to have it at the beginning. And I found a planet PDF. To add that in. Give it a second to catch up with me. So there we go, planets of the solar system. And then now I'm going to add some activities to that. And then I'll show you from a student end what it would look like when they played. So I'm going back to my lesson activities. I can do again my lesson activities or from the Explore page. And I'm going to add that to a list. Selecting my list. Oh wait, no, that's not the right one. Solar system list. And now if I go back to my list, there we go, there's my solar system list. And now I can send that entire list to my students. So then for my student end, when they play the list, so I'll just show again, I'm sending it to Danielle, who never does her homework. Go. Now I'll be able to, I'll show you from, if you play the list, what it would look like. And it'll look the same from a student perspective as well. So when students are assigned the list, how it will play will be the same. So from my end, I can play it randomized, which would mean things appear in any order. Or if I want to go in order, I have my first page, which would be my PDF. So, which again, I found online. This particular one has 2 pages, so I can select the second page. So now I have all that information. This obviously is not real words, but pretty pictures. So for this particular activity would be, my directions to my students would have been, read this information, and then the next button would allow them to then play the activity. And if they got stuck, so okay, there's Mercury closest to the sun. You can go back, check again for answers or review, and then go back to the lesson activity.
Danielle?
Yes.
Can students go back to the PDF as a reference while they're playing list?
I believe from a student perspective, the list will just go in order, so they will have to complete through the activities. I don't believe that from a student end they can toggle through advancing the next slides.
However they can, as they could any web page or document, they can print out the PDF if you would like them to.
So I would right click and then print. So that's the list feature. So I heard a couple dings come in, so I know that means we have questions on the way.
If they go to answer a question, like 2 questions, and they go back to look at the PDF, would it hold their answers when they return to the activity?
I'm not sure. Let's see. I know from my teacher end when I played my list, my answers did not hold. I would have to check with the student. Let me go into my student account. Give me just a moment. I'll log into that. Jack, if you have any insight that you want to.
My insight would be I don't believe so, but show me and try to maybe prove me wrong.
We'll see. Yeah, I don't believe so, but I am double checking right now.
So I just did it on my phone and it does not hold the answers, just so you know.
Okay.
You don't have to go do it.
As I just get back in.
I'm sorry. So it doesn't, because they have to go through and finish it for everything to be held. So it does not. So it is 7:49. So I kind of want to also open up to anyone for any questions outside of our topic for this evening. So if you have anything, feel free to answer. I'm going to give our little plugs to everything that we're doing as I wait to see if any questions come in for our wait time. So remember, again, the webinars, Mondays, they are at 11:30 a.m. and that's the drop-in. And then on Wednesdays at 1:00 p.m. and 7:00 p.m. Eastern time. So feel free to join any of those. You go to NUITEQ.com/webinars, and that's where you would register for them. I would also like to ask any of you that are here to please email me at jr@nuitec.com. You can see NUITEQ on our shirts, so how to spell it, nuitec.com. Any ideas that you have of things that you would like us to review, we would be happy to do that and go over things with you. It's exciting to see the mix that we're getting from people around the world right now. I hope that we are of help to you. No other questions have come in. Danielle, do you have anything that you would like to finish with?
No, thank you so much, everyone, for coming.
And people are writing thank you, and thank you for the presentation. Thank you all for taking time out of your evenings to join us. So thank you very much. It was wonderful to see everybody again this evening, and we look forward to seeing you again soon. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone. Thanks again.
Bye.